on Online for Authors, I'm chatting with Tim Weed, author of The Afterlife Project. Welcome, Tim.
Well, thank you, Terry. It's really great to be here.
It is wonderful to have you. I really enjoyed the book. I was telling you before we got started that that's a little bit surprising because this isn't a genre I would normally pick up, but I loved it. You did the characters well. Before we dive in, give the listeners just a quick idea of what they're going to find when they open up the cover of The Afterlife Project.
So, I mean, it's an adventure story. It's kind of it's a little hard to describe. It's a literary speculative novel that takes place in the deep future. It's two timelines. It's the deep future, and it's sort of a post-apocalyptic time travel story. Is one way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it was very fascinating. And like I said, I tend not to, people start talking about, post-apocalyptic, and I'm like, yeah, it's just not going to be my thing. But the characters in this were very well developed, and you did a great job pulling me in where immediately I had to know what else was going on. So I thought that was very interesting.
Thank you. I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Yeah. What made you decide, hey, science fiction, that's what I'm going to write?
Well, so it's interesting because my first novel was a historical novel. And then I have a collection of short stories that sort of, you could describe them as being literary mainstream or psychological adventure stories. And then, but I was looking for a new book. And I wanted it to, I really had enjoyed the research that I did for my historical novel, Whirlpool's Island, but I was really interested in doing research about science. And so I started researching the science behind the topic that I wanted to look into, which was, big topics like climate change and mass extinction and biodiversity and all that stuff like that. And it turns out that there's a lot of scientific research. So I did the scientific research and started writing, and I didn't even realize that is sort of the definition of science fiction, is doing, is a book that is kind of, braced by scientific research.
Right.
It was almost an accident that I did it. And that's why I call it sort of literary speculative, because it wasn't really intended to be science fiction, but it certainly is. But I think of it as also sort of literary and that
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that perhaps that's why I enjoyed it so much, was that it's accidentally science fiction. There's an amazing story, and it fits into the science fiction category. And so that works for me. I know that for people who are writing in this kind of genre, that getting the science right is really important. Yet you're also talking about science that isn't 100% sure, and maybe even stuff in the future that you're kind of like basing it off of what we know now and what we assume we'll know in the future. How hard was that research? I love research. So for me, I'm a research junkie.
I mean, you can research the whole, you can just keep researching and never write the book, right?
Exactly.
So the research wasn't hard. It was pretty in depth, and it was fun to do. And, so I was inspired by a couple of scientists that I met actually when I was considering writing this story. I knew that I wanted it to be on these big topics, topics like geological time and, the possibility of the future of humanity and stuff like that. And so I used to work for National Geographic, and I was on a trip to Tierra del Fuego, and there were a couple of scientists on board this little ship that we were sailing around. Well, we were sort of motoring around Cape Horn, and there were these two scientists, and one of them was an astrophysicist from who was the director of the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii, and the other was a young paleoclimatologist from Princeton. And so it was conversations with these scientists that really got me started on the research.
Right.
And then the research itself, it was all areas that I was interested in doing, so it didn't feel like a burden.
Right. I tell people all the time, I think it's one of the reasons why I enjoy writing historical fiction, is because I love the research aspect of it. And then I get to write, and it's like, woo, two of my favorite things. Exactly.
But the thing you have to do is you fall in love with your research. So you have to, as a writer, you have to be like, well, what is the novel asking for?
Right.
You have to kind of, oftentimes it's cutting the research and not putting the research in. That is it's just kind of like it's the iceberg theory that, everyone talk about. It's like, all these things, but it doesn't necessarily all go into the book.
Absolutely. In fact, there have been books that I have read where I felt like, are we are we reading a scientific journal, or are we reading a novel?
Yeah.
And with the novel, you have to pick out the 3 or 4 main pieces that you want, these little points that kind of move the story along, and all the rest of it that was so cool to learn is just stuff that you can talk about when you're on a show like this.
Yeah, but it does
Right.
does give you a certain amount of authority, So
Right.
the iceberg theory is the motion of an iceberg. There's something about it when it moves across the water. It feels very stately, and it feels very sort of powerful. And so,
Right.
and that's because of all the mass of the iceberg that's under the water. And it's the same with the knowledge that you get from doing all that research. You
Right.
may not address it directly in the book, but your story is going to have more authority. Your narrative voice is going to have more authority because you have looked into all
Because you know what's under there.
Exactly.
It isn't just facts thrown out into the middle of nowhere. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. What do you do? I'm just curious for my own edification. What do you do to kind of stop the research? Because I can go down rabbit holes and then maybe never come up for air. So do you have a plan in place that keeps you from never coming up to write?
Yeah, well, so it's more, I would describe it more as an approach than a plan.
Yeah.
My approach to research is I try to do just enough. I try to limit myself to do just enough to know, the sort of parameters of what could happen in the story, and how the story, the big plot points are going to be influenced by the research that I'm doing. In the case of historical fiction, it would be the history. In this case, it would be what's, scientific possibility and speculation about the future. But then I try not to go down the rabbit hole before I start writing, because that could really slow you down. So once I have a minimum of research, I write the first draft, and I usually do it longhand. And because the story then tells you what you need to research more deeply. So I have writers have their own little symbols. I have a little symbol, a double X, that I use, which basically is to myself, okay, you need to go back and do more research. So then when I've got a first draft, this is kind of simplifying the process. Once I've got a first draft, then I go back, and before I do the next draft, I go back and search all of those double X's and see, okay, well, I need to research this, I need to research that, So
yeah, it's very similar to what I do then, because I do enough research to get started.
Yep.
And I don't do double X's. I highlight in yellow. And so when I'm going through all of my highlighted yellow spots, it's like, oh, I need to do here and here and here. And then, like you said, then okay, now I can move my story forward. Every now and then while I'm writing, I will stop and do like a quick research. Like, I need to know, was this product available in 1932? And I need to know, because it's going to make a difference. And so I just really quickly look, but then I have to pull away. It's like, that's all I needed was that one thing. Yes, it was there. Good. Done.
Yeah, that's very similar to my approach.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, the era that we live in, you can do these little research things very quickly.
Yes. Which is very nice.
Yeah.
I can't imagine trying to do this work, 40 years ago.
No.
That's a lot of library time.
Yes. A lot of archival time.
Yeah. And microfiche and all kinds of things that we don't have to do now, that we can just, say, hey, Google. Right. Absolutely. So we follow several characters, but 2 main characters. We follow Nick. So he's 10,000 years in the future, right?
Yep.
And then we've got Alejandra, who is 2068. So near future.
Right.
And we're following her journals, and we're kind of seeing things from his perspective. What made you decide, hey, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to do a dual timeline, and not just 100-year span, but like a 10,000-year span? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah. So the 10,000 years was because I mentioned that I'm sort of interested. I'm really interested in time, in time in general, but in deep time in particular. So large swaths of time. But also part of the book was sort of trying to sort of imagine what the Earth is going to be like in the future. And the 10,000 years actually came from this conversation that I had in Tierra del Fuego with the astrophysicist. he was saying, I was saying, well, because I was asking him about one-way time travel, because one-way time travel is kind of an aspect of the book. And I was saying, do you think that, being a physicist, an astrophysicist, do you think this is possible, or plausible? And he said, sure. And he took out a napkin and started writing down equations about quantum physics and relativity. And I was like, this is great. Thank you so much.
Right.
And basically he said, so the way that this would be plausible is if you consider humanity, that there's already interest in sort of colonizing the stars, right? Interstellar travel. Right. The nearest star system, Proxima Centauri, that has a Goldilocks planet, the kind of planet that could be seen as a colonizable planet similar to Earth, is 10,000 years away, assuming a travel close to the speed of light. And so he said, so why don't we imagine a system in which they're getting ready to do interstellar travel, but they have to keep the colonists who they're sending to this star system alive for 10,000 years. How can we do this using this system of quantum physics and everything else? And so the 10,000 years was okay. This is, if that's a time that you think is plausible, that's a time that's interesting to me too, because I'd be very curious to know what the Earth is like in
10,000 years, right?
And so I asked the paleoclimatologist, I said, given your knowledge, a paleoclimatologist studies the deep past to find out what the Earth might be like, given the greenhouse gas concentrations that we're going to see, et cetera. And what would you see the planet being like? So I had these two great sources of information that really got me started on research, and 10,000 years sort of stuck in my mind. The 2068 timeline is right. I wanted it to be near future, but I wanted it to be far enough in the future that some very dire things could have happened.
Right.
Which is really important for the story. Right.
Absolutely.
And then
go ahead.
Doing it in two timelines. I love two timeline books because it gives the reader a break, and it's a way to sort of play the stories off each other.
Yeah. I also like a dual timeline. In fact, the one that I'll start soon is a dual timeline. It's in my head. I haven't got it close enough that I can write anything yet. It's still percolating in my mind. So are you still there? There, what happened?
I don't know. Something happened with my screen.
That's
I was trying to adjust it. It cut you off.
That's we can edit through it because we're still running, so that's perfect. Okay. But all of a sudden, I'm like, what happened? No, that's all right. That's all right. That's all right. No, I was saying that I also like the dual timeline, and the one that I'm about to write is a dual. I'm not ready to write it yet because it's still percolating in my mind, but I have this idea of several generations between the person that is speaking and what we're going to be learning about. So it is cool. Like you, I enjoy that aspect of it.
Yeah.
How difficult was it for you to write from a male perspective and then a female perspective? Because these are two very main characters. So it isn't like a side character of someone else. It's a very main character. And I'm just curious.
Yeah. So I did think about that a lot. And I guess I maybe expected it to be harder than it was. I didn't find it very hard. I think that, I'm sort of like, I guess I'm sort of a Jungian in my belief about human psychology. And I feel like all of us have a male side and a female side.
Right.
And so sort of accessing that. And I also, there's a quote, I wish I had it exactly, but to paraphrase, there's a quote from Margaret Atwood who said something to the effect of, I don't believe in the female perspective any more than I believe in the male perspective. It's really that it's a human perspective. And I think that's we share so much more as humans that the gender is very important, but I feel like we all of us we are equipped with both sides. And
well, no, exactly. And it's not like, men don't have certain feelings or women don't have certain feelings. And so I agree. But sometimes when I talk with men who write a woman's perspective, they do find it very difficult because they feel more firmly planted on their male side and have trouble accessing, the I don't know, the more female side of things. And I've done just the opposite, of course, writing a male character where you'd have to kind of say, okay, so he's probably not going to, have a fall apart like I would. So what's he going to do instead?
Right. Yeah.
Because,
asking questions like that and like, what
right.
would a woman think? I asked myself that a lot. And of course I did also have beta readers who helped me with that too. Like, I can ask them, does this feel accurate to you?
Right.
Does this feel like something that a woman would think or write?
Right. Because in particular, you were writing a woman's point of view who was keeping a journal.
Right.
And so to capture what a woman would put in a journal versus necessarily maybe what a man would put in a journal, I think might be very different things.
Yeah.
And so, and you did a really good job of it. And I really enjoyed that. Is there anything in particular other than, hey, this was a great story, which it was, that you hope people kind of get from it when they put it down?
Well, if I think about there's a lot actually. I was really trying to sort of put the reader in the position of being really conscious of where they are on the planet topographically, because when I have moments in my life that are like that, it just feels really important. And I feel like it's something that we as humans sometimes are a little bit separate from these days, because we live this life that is, focused on screens, or maybe many of us live in cities, and you don't get a chance to sort of be out and just sort of understanding where you are. So that was the first thing. And then the other thing was, and that's really true of all my writing. And so I try to do in all my writing. My writing is very place-based. But also this idea of, for this book in particular, it kept coming up, this idea of humanity's role with regard to nature, and the sort of urgent need for us as a species to change the paradigm in terms of the way that we treat nature. We've always sort of been the exploiters of nature, feeling like we're above nature, we're sort of separate from it, and sort of, I think what's in order for our species and the planet to really survive, we need to change the paradigm so that we become more the stewards of nature. So I guess that was kind of like an underlying message that I would love for people to take out of it.
Absolutely. So that's interesting. In my book, Daughters of Green Mountain Gap, it's a historical fiction, and it brings in a Cherokee medicine man, and he talks about that idea of balance and balance with nature and everything. And so it's very similar, done from a very different perspective, but it's a similar idea of, we're here, and yes, we're kind of over nature, but we should be a steward of it, not a destroyer of it.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mentioned the Native American perspective, because that's something that's been very important to me too. Right. I have ancestors who are Native Americans, and my first book actually was Willpool's Island we did have a Native American shaman as a major character. But in this book, in the Afterlife Project, I also have a character, Nick, who is all alone, and he in a sense has to invent his own religion.
Yes.
In order to stay sane. And the religion has real echoes, and this was intentional on my part, of the Native American religions, especially in terms of, balance with nature and that kind of thing. And also he adopts a form of animism, which is similar to the Native American religions.
I found it really interesting as he tried to cope with the fact that he's alone. And so he's alone, and I never could quite figure out how many years he spent alone, but he was alone for a good period of time. And it reminded me of, like, there's different television shows I've seen where people are alone and they start talking to objects and they're doing the weird things. And I can't imagine myself. I would never be able to survive for any length of time alone. I would go crazy very quickly, because
that's his struggle too. Is
yes.
how does he resist insanity and manage to stay alive long enough? Right.
And it's like, and his struggles at time to determine, did he even want to stay alive?
Right.
Exactly. Like, was there anything to stay alive for?
Yes.
I found all of that a very interesting concept just in life and how we live it. And, like people in today's world, with people all around them, struggle to determine whether they want to stay alive. And so it was just, I don't know, I found it to be very, very interesting and very thought provoking.
Thank you.
When did you start to write this?
This was it was probably around 2019 or so.
Okay.
It was
Okay.
definitely pre-COVID. For sure.
Okay. So
Yeah.
one of the questions I was going to ask is, you definitely have a disease that comes through and kind of like, swipes through people. Did that idea come up because of COVID, or had you already come up with that idea?
No, that was pre-COVID. That was an idea that came, and it was sort of the demand of the story in a sense. What
Right.
it was a possibility. I mean, this is a speculative novel, so it was sort of speculating on what could happen, but it was necessary for the story for something really bad to happen to the species in general. And that was, and so that was one of the scientifically plausible aspects of research was a little epidemiology. And this, in particular, in this case, it was humanity trying to respond to climate change by doing geoengineering and forcing these eruptions of volcanoes and throwing, ash into the air that also ended up kind of getting out of control and melting aspects of parts of the permafrost. And that when the permafrost melts, there are viruses and everything in there.
There are things stuck in it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's the cause of the hyperpandemic.
Right.
Is a virus that's released.
I just found it very interesting. That's why I wanted to know, was like, did the pandemic say to you, oh, I could put a pandemic, or did you do a pandemic? And then when one came, you said, uh-oh, I better stop writing.
I did say, uh-oh. I was like, okay, I don't want this book to be, because it's not, I mean, that's an aspect of the backstory, the hyperpandemic.
Right, but it's not really
it's not a big part of the plot.
Right.
I mean, it makes the plot necessary. But yeah, so I was like, oh, this is I'm not writing a pandemic book here.
I know. It's interesting. My very first novel, it's about Ukraine, about 3 generations in Ukraine, and it came out 1 month before the current Ukrainian crisis.
Wow, it's amazing.
So when those kinds of things happen, it's like I've been teasing people and telling them that I'm going to write about world peace, because apparently when I write things, stuff happens, and so
there are some weird things happening. I mentioned the Jungian psychology, and this whole idea of synchronicities, and the idea that there is something about fiction. If you look at, like, it's really, this book is officially science fiction. I've been doing a lot of reading in science fiction, and it's really quite amazing how prophetic science fiction has been. And I think that there's something about a novelist when they're really truly tapping into their deep imagination, which is the human collective unconscious. It is kind of edging on prophecy sometimes.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Unfortunately, my third book was about it's a healer. She's a granny woman. And during that time, my husband got very ill, and he ended up with glioblastoma, and he has since passed away.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. But it was like, why did I write about that? And so it does make you start to think, like, maybe I should only do very light and happy topics because.
Yeah, but then nobody would want to read it.
That's true. That's
people
true.
Read for darkness. I think that's one of the characteristics of the novel that I love, is that darkness is a big part of what we do. And if you don't have darkness, you can't have light.
Right. I think that it helps people explore things that are a little scary to explore in real life.
Yes.
So when you pick up a book, it allows you to go places that you certainly don't want your life to go.
Exactly. I mean, the metaphor that I've heard about that is the tiger in the cage. Like in a 19th century town, they would pay 5 cents to go see a tiger in a cage, because it's this big, dangerous thing, but it's in a cage, so you're safe. So I think that Tiger in the Cage is a great novel, or metaphor for what a novel does too.
I absolutely agree. I had never considered it that way.
Yeah.
So Tim, what are you working on now?
I am actually working on, I have a book coming out in May. So I just got done with the editing process of that. But the book that I'm working on now is a book that I've been working on for quite a long time, off and on. And it's a bit of a departure. It's a kind of a comedic spy novel, sort of espionage novel that involves a hapless tour guide. I myself was a tour guide have been for much of my life, and who goes to Cuba and gets involved with an international antiquities ring and money laundering thing. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of based a little bit, not based on, but it's inspired by Graham Greene's Our Man in Havana. I don't know if you've ever read that book. It's a
Yeah.
great book because it's funny and suspenseful. So that's what I'm shooting for. It's a challenge, but I'm enjoying it.
Yeah. So you and I seem to be on some parallels here because the book that I have coming out in April is a contemporary comedy. And very different from anything I've ever written. And I don't know. I just felt this need. I had this idea for a woman who's going through menopause. And it's just funny. It's kind of a tongue-in-cheek look at this woman dealing with, all the things. And so you're doing a departure book as well. So I think every now and then, doesn't that feel good as an author to sometimes stand back and just do something different?
It does. I mean, I have no idea whether this book that I'm working on is ever going to get published, right? I don't know. But the book that's coming out in May is it's more along the lines of the Afterlife Project, but it's a contemporary speculative novel set in Vermont. But it's close enough that my publisher's like, yes, we'll take this.
Right,
sure.
Right.
But this other one is not speculative. It's like contemporary. So I'm not sure that the same publisher is going to take. I don't know where I'm going to.
Right. And that's one of the things that as authors, it can get a little bit difficult because I like to write what's in my head.
Exactly.
And I don't always write the same thing. Like different things come to me. And so I like being able to just say, well, this is the story that I have right now. Exactly. And this is the one I want to write. I
think it's really important to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Terry, I think that, because I think that that's part of what being and having a long career as an artist involves reinventing yourself and following your imagination where it follows rather than writing to a specific marketing niche. I think that you can really easily get trapped if you do that.
Yeah. And I don't like feeling like I'm in a box. I don't like someone telling me. In fact, people will often say, oh, you're a historical fiction author. And I say, no, I'm not.
Exactly. Yes.
I'm not. I'm a character-driven fiction author, and wherever my character happens to be or need to be, that's where I'm going to be writing. And so it's very interesting. And I've had some people tell me, well, you're going to ruin your career that way. You'll never become famous. And it's like, okay.
Maybe you'll ruin your career, but you won't ruin your artistic persona.
Right.
That's the main thing is you won't sell your soul. Because if you wanted to just write to make money, I mean, there's so many better ways to make money.
Oh, yes. If this were a money thing, I'm in it for the wrong reason.
Exactly. Me too.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right, Tim, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, talk with you about the Afterlife Project or other things that you're writing, what's the best way to do that?
Well, they could go to my website, timweed.net, and there's a contact form right on there, and they can it goes directly to my email. So just through my website is the best way. But also if on social media, I'm on Instagram and Threads and Blue Sky, Facebook. You can always message me through those apps or go to the link in bio at any of those social media apps, which is a link tree that has all links to get in touch with me. Lots of different ways. It's very easy for people to get in touch with me.
Fantastic. And I'll have all that in the show notes, guys. So run out, grab a copy of the Afterlife Project. Once you read it, make sure you review it because as authors, we love those reviews.
Thank you. That's very important. Yes.
And you're gonna love the book. It is really, really amazing. And Tim, I want to thank you so much for being with me today.
It is such a pleasure, Terry. I really appreciate that you read the book and enjoyed it and had me on. It's been wonderful to have this conversation.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.